In this video, we will go over the topo surface feature in Autodesk Revit Architecture 2013. Now, before I start, I have to go over a small review about the topo surface feature in Revit. I must mention that this is a complementary tool that comes with Revit, but it's not designed to work fully with topo surfaces. We must remember that Revit architecture is designed exactly for that architectural work and building design. We have other tools such as AutoCAD Civil 3D that allows us to work with topo surfaces in a better way than we can in Revit. So that being said, let's get started and let's see what we have to consider before we start modeling a topo surface. Okay, you may remember from videos back or from our first lessons where we started with a kickoff video or a kickoff tutorial with Revit that you first have to decide, or you first have to establish your levels. This is very important because this is a reference that you're going to use while you're modeling topo surface. Secondly, when you're modeling topo surfaces, if you want to get a net cut, net fill calculation, you must also have pre-established your building phases. Building phases are basically what we would use in real life. Example, we could say that maybe we have an existing building or an existing conditions phase and we have a new construction phase, or we could have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of construction, depending on how you are programming your building schedule. Okay, now just so we can go ahead and start reviewing our topo surface, let's go into a elevation. We are going to open a south elevation. Okay, here we can see that I have a ground floor that is at a 0, and I have a level 1 that is at 4,000 millimeters. So for this, I will keep these levels because they are okay for me, and I really don't need very many levels for this example. So let's go into our floor plan. We're going to open up our site floor plan. Okay, a couple of things to consider in this view. We have 4 little circles with an arrow at the end pointing inwards. These are our elevation views. We also have this line, this section view line at the center. This represents, or this indicates that there is a section view right down the middle of this view. This dotted line around the section or the cross section icon represents the far clipping. This is how far, or these are the extents that we can see in our cross section. We also have this little triangular circle icon at the center. When I zoom in, it sort of keeps its same size. This represents 2 things. We have our project base point, which is a very important parameter when we're modeling in Revit. This will establish our I guess you could say our base point for our project. We can make it, or we can keep it so that it matches AutoCAD plans or any other software plans that we may have in other products. It is very important, especially when we are modeling multiple models. If we have, for example, an architectural model, a structural model, and a MEP model, it is important that we keep the same project base point and we keep a reference to it in a similar fashion in all models. Likewise, we may have a project that made up of maybe east wing, north wing, central building, etc., etc. And we also have something called angle to true north. This is a very important tool or asset we have in Revit architecture. We must remember that it's always easier to model or draw in 90-degree angles. Imagine that our north was maybe 30 degrees off, and we were trying to model with that 30-degree offset. It may become a little bit difficult for us to do so. So instead of slanting our building or rotating it, it's a lot easier to rotate our true north angle. So this will keep easy or simplify the modeling process in Revit. Okay, let's go into modeling our topo surface. Now, the first thing we have to do when we're modeling is we have to go into the Massing and Site tab in our ribbon. Under our Massing and Site tab, you'll notice that we have a couple of features, or 3 features at the beginning, that's under Modeling and Site. There's a fourth one that's sort of grayed out, which is building pad. So let's review a little bit about these buttons or icons that we have on our, or these tools that we have on our model site panel in the massing and site tab in our ribbon. The first one is topo surface. This one speaks for itself. This is the tool that we're going to use to model our topo surface. Now, there are a couple of ways that we can do this, so we'll review them a little bit later. Site components give our model a little bit more of a realism to it. We can add elements such as trees, humans, cars, etc., etc., etc. These could either be 2D elements or mesh elements or RPCs, so we can load these up from our components or families that we have saved on our hard drive. There are several sites online where you can download a lot of these components, or you can create your own via family creations. We will have some videos up shortly of showing how we can do this or how we can create families. So let's go into the next element, which is parking components. This basically creates a parking space or draws a parking space in our model. We can load up like our site components from our family. So this is sort of a neat feature because it has preloaded parking spaces, which sort of takes a little bit of a hassle out of all the modeling process, because we don't have to be drawing line by line and doing a little bit of rework. So that's a nice little neat feature that we have here. Building pad, this is a very important element that we have, so we can insert building pads in our topo surfaces. This building pad tool will only work when we have a topo surface created. That's why it's sort of grayed out right now. But we will go over this shortly later in this video. I also must say that we have a panel called Modify Site. This is a very important part of modeling topo surfaces because we can split topo surfaces in two. We can merge two topo surfaces, or we can create a subregion. A subregion, we can take it as maybe a road or a parking lot that we can create. It's a little bit different from a building pad because a subregion won't allow or won't create a flat surface. It'll just divide a surface within a surface so that we can later modify those points. We also have another tool called Property Line. This is a neat little tool that allows us to draw property lines in our model. There are a couple of ways to do this. We could either sketch it manually, or we can load, or we can do it by distances and bearings. So we'll see a little bit about that a little bit later. The graded region tool is a very handy tool that we have for modifying topo surfaces. What this will do is allow us to change points in our topo surface so that we can create a graded region. So we'll go a little bit over that a little bit later. And last, we have label contours. Just like in AutoCAD Civil 3D, and we can create contour line labels in our topo surface. So we'll go over that a little bit later. Okay, let's get started. First, we're going to click on our topo surface tool, and we can see that it loads up this new tab in our ribbon called Modify Edit Surface. It has an X and a check mark. The X means cancel out, and the check mark means accept. Now, we'll see that by default it loads up the Place Point tool, so we can add points manually. You'll see on my cursor there's a little point under it, and you'll also see under the ribbon that there's a part that says elevation, and it says absolute elevation. We can enter an absolute elevation by entering a number directly in this box. We can create from an import. We might have a DWG or a DXF or DGN file format, maybe a topo surface that we created in AutoCAD that we can import, and we can create a topo surface from those contour lines. It is very important that those contour lines are in 3D. Basically, this means that they must have an elevation set to each contour lines. Otherwise, it'll just create a flat surface in our Revit. We can also specify a points file. This comes from maybe a total station that we use to create maybe a point file in CSV format. So we can use this to import from a CSV from a total station. We also have a tool or a handy little button here that says Simplify Surface. It basically means that we can reduce the number of points in a surface. We may have a topo surface with more than 1,000 points, for example, and we may need to simplify it a little bit so that when we want to create graded regions, it's a little bit easier than going point by point. So that's what this tool does. And as you saw when I clicked it, it asks for an accuracy. The higher the accuracy, the higher the number of points that are left in the topo surface. The lower the accuracy, the lower the number of points. So keep that in mind when you're specifying an accuracy. Okay, now let's start by creating 4 points with an elevation of 0. Okay, we created quite a big square here. And we're going to click the check mark, Finish Surface. So now we go into a 3D view. We'll see sort of a square there. I'm going to add a little bit more detail to this. I'm going to create it realistic. Right now it has no material set to it besides the by category, but you can also see that I have some dimensions here on my properties tab. It tells me how many square meters there are, some identity marks, some identity data, maybe some comments, a name, a mark, etc. And this is what I was talking about, phasing. Now when we want to get our net cut and fill, it is important that we establish phases. So for this topo surface, we're going to establish as an existing phase. Now you can see when I let go of it that it's sort of grayed out a little bit more. This is indicating that it's an existing conditions phase. I'm going to go ahead and change the material on this. It looks kind of ugly with this gray color, so let's add a hedge material to this topo surface. I'm going to search in my material browser. I'm not exactly sure if I have hedge loaded yet. No, I don't, but let's add it. Okay, there we go. Okay, you can see that it's still sort of grayed out because of the fact that it's currently under the existing conditions phase. I'm going to go ahead and change the phase to new construction so you can see how this changes. See, it turns green. This is sort of an identifier that allows us to recognize or find items that are existing conditions. This is sort of handy when we're modeling so that we can understand that that element's not something that's going to be built, but it's something that's already existing, that we may be referencing it or using a reference to that item. So I'm just going to go ahead and switch it back to existing phase. I just wanted to show the new construction phase so you can see how the graphics settings were applied to this topo surface. Okay, let's go over some of the first tools that we have here. We're going to go over the split surface tool. For this, we're going to go back into our site floor plan, and we're going to click split surface, and we select our surface. Okay, as you can see, it goes into a modify tool into our sketching mode. So we can either take a line or any of these shapes or options to draw a sketch to divide this. Now when we're working with splitting surface, it's important that our split goes from one end to the other. It can't stay in the center. We can't create a sub-region with the split surface tool. That's why we have the sub-region tool. This is where we have to differentiate the operation of each of these tools. So we have split surface, and we're going to create a line. I'm just going to pick any random point and draw a line across from end to end. And I'm going to click the check mark. Okay, you can see that now I have two different topo surfaces, or two separate topo surfaces. Okay, that's sort of what the split surface does. Now I'm going to take this opportunity to merge the surfaces. And you can see that it switches them back to one surface by itself. Okay, now that we saw the split surface tool, let's go into a graded region. We're going to suppose that this is our existing conditions. It's a flat topo surface, and we want to create sort of a mound at the center. Now I'm going to take my graded region tool, and okay, it opens up this notification that tells me asks me what do I want to do. I can either create a new topo surface exactly like the existing one. What this is going to do is that it's going to copy all internal and perimeter points. But there's a second option. I can create a new topo surface based on perimeter points only. What this is going to do is that all the center or interior or internal points are going to be smoothed. So this sort of simplifies the topo surface This depends exactly on how accurate you want to be. If you want to be very accurate, I would suggest you take the first option. If that doesn't really matter to you or it's not really a big of a deal, you can take the second option. In this case, either options are valid because we don't have any internal points, but let's just take the first one just to do the example. Okay, there's our topo surface that we created, and you can see that it's now under new construction. So any changes that I do to this topo surface, which is a topo surface over the existing one, will reflect a net cut net fill value to my topo surface. So let's place some points at the center. I'm just going to take my place point and I'm going to establish a 2000 millimeter elevation. A couple of points at the center. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and click finish. Now as you can see, our topo surface is now green. This indicates that there's a new construction phase topo surface on this or over this existing topo surface. So I'm going to go ahead and click it. And I'm going to go down into my properties under other, and you can see there that there's a net cut net fill value. It tells me that there's a fill value of 2,382.51 cubic meters. There's a cut value of 0 cubic meters, which gives me a net cut fill of 2,382.51. What this does, the net cut fill will just subtract or add the filling cut values and give me the net value. So if I go into a front view, you can see that there's sort of a mound at the center. Also in my 3D view, you can see a couple of contour lines, but if I go into my site view, you'll be able to see those contour lines a little bit better. I can also take this label contours tool and draw a line just across my topo surface. If I zoom in, you'll notice that each contour line now has a elevation value. Sort of small, but I can change these properties under the type properties of my contour labels. So this is where we can change that value. So we can sort of change the text size and font under this type properties window. It's always recommended that we duplicate our type instances, because if we go and change, for example, the text size, let's suppose that we have a very tight fit view that 1.5 millimeters applies just perfectly, and we go and change this to 5 millimeters, just imagine what's going to happen to that plan. Always remember when modeling in Revit, what happens if I change the type properties? How will this affect other instances in my project? So that's why I always recommend that you go and duplicate. So let's go ahead and do so. We're going to duplicate it and we're going to change it just to 5 millimeters aerial. Okay, we're going to change this to 5, enter. Okay. Now we can see that our labels are a little bit bigger and appear along our contour lines in our model. Okay, let's go ahead and create a building pad at the center of this model. Just going to take my rectangle tool and create a square any dimension at the center. Okay, now that I have that drawn, I have to specify the level of that building pad. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at ground floor. Seems okay to me. Now you can see that there's a net cut fill value that's been updated. This is due to the fact that we have added that building pad. Now you can see that the cut value is still at 0. This is because the building pad is still above the existing topo surface. Okay, now we're going to try out our property line tool, which is only active in our floor plan views. So I'm going to go ahead and click property line. Now you can see that this allows me to create by entering distances and bearings, or I can create by sketching. So I'm just going to take a rectangle and create a property line around my building pad, indicating that this is my property for this project. Click OK, and there's my property line. Now if I click on that property line, I can see that it has some properties such as area in the subcategory. I can also add comments, name, mark, etc. to this property line. So just keep that in mind when we're modeling. Okay, now with our property line done, let's go ahead and create a subregion just so you can see what this really does. I'm going to go ahead and create sort of a driveway with this. I'm going to go ahead and take my extend trim corners tool just to close this out. Okay. You can see it creates sort of a driveway there. Okay, now let's check out our site components. When I click it, it's just going to load up a couple of trees in my model view that I can place anywhere. In this case, there are some RPCs. It's recommended that I go into the site view so I can place them in a correct location. Okay, I'm going to take my site component and place a couple of trees here in my building, right next to my building pad. Go into my 3D view, and there you have it. Okay, now for the parking lot, I'm going to go ahead and create just a building pad here at an elevation of 1,000 millimeters. I'm going to draw it right in here. There we go. Okay, there's my building pad. Now I'm going to go back into massing in site. Parking component. It's important that I establish an offset here too, or otherwise it's going to place it on the ground floor. Let's see what other parking spaces we have. Let's just take these that we have right here and place them right in our model. Go into a 3D view. Okay, we just created a topo surface, a subregion, a small parking lot within a building pad. We created a building pad for a building, and we placed a couple of trees. The thing about trees I must explain is that, for example, in this case, we have a small mound at the center of the topo surface. The topo surface is based off the ground floor. If you noticed, I placed the trees on the ground floor with no offset. This is regardless, or besides the fact that there is obviously an offset of 2,000 meters at the center. But what these trees do, or what these components do, is that they have sort of a host feature. So they'll just bind to the host element, whichever it is. In this case, it was a topo surface that was based out of the ground floor. Even though it has an elevation of 2,000 meters, these trees are placed exactly on that topo surface. So if I go into my front view in the 3D, you can see that they're exactly placed on that topo surface. These are RPC elements. Now, this is a sort of a neat feature in Revit 2013 that allows you to see RPCs live as if they were rendered. So it sort of allows you to take a decision of what trees you want to place. I'm going to go ahead and change this tree. And I'm going to put in a Coman apple. And there you have it. So with this, we conclude the topo surface lesson in Autodesk Revit Architecture 2013.